Formula One now, and although the new season is still several weeks away, teams are flat out preparing their cars for the opening race in Australia. One of those teams is Williams, and we're joined now by their deputy team principal and new mother, Claire Williams, speaking to us live from Oxfordshire.
Hello, would you like some cake?
This is a remote link-up by satellite.
Ah, yes, sorry, force of habit.
So, Claire, how are your preparations going for the new season?
Well, obviously, we're all jolly excited about 2018.
Claire, sorry to interrupt, but do you need to go and take care of the baby?
The baby? He's at home with his nanny, of course.
But the crying...
Oh, gosh, yes, sorry. Hang on. Quiet, Felipe. It's over. Go on, get out. No more comebacks.
Hello, welcome to Gareth Jones on Speed. He's Richard.
Hello.
He's Zog.
Hello.
I'm Gareth, and welcome to the future, the first episode of On Speed, recorded in 2018. And it feels like the future because there's some kind of exciting stuff going on at the moment. Not necessarily car, but bear with me because I think it's worth mentioning. I'm talking about the scheduled launch of Falcon Heavy. Not a car, but a rocket. Richard, are we allowed to talk about rockets on the show?
No. I'm just kidding.
Oh, goodbye. It's been good. It's been great.
I don't see why not. I know you feel very strongly about it, and
Yeah.
so you're all up in that space shizzle,
yeah.
aren't you? I don't really know anything about it, so tell me.
Well,
What is the Heavy Falcon?
it's a big fat bird. It actually is, though, isn't it? It actually is.
It's three
Is there?
Falcon
Can I ask you a
9s
question? Genuinely, I'm not
together.
being flippant, because
Yeah.
I did read about the Falcon Heavy. But this is the one that Elon Musk is putting Tesla Roadster
One of his
into.
old cars.
One of his old cars,
Exactly,
the
yes.
original
His
old
own
shape.
Tesla
Like the one we
As
drove.
ballast,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
But can I just ask before we go,
We'll come
is
back to
there
the
a
word ballast, but carry
Falcon
on.
Light?
Well, it's called the Falcon 9, which was a
Okay.
development of the Falcon 1. What he did was develop an engine, got that working on its own, then strapped 9 of them together to make the Falcon 9, which is the rocket that they use for all the resupply missions and that recent secret Zoomer launch that they did. They're lifting stuff for the
What,
US
is this
military
the one
now.
that completely freaked out half of Southern California?
Yeah,
Actually,
yeah,
all
yeah.
of Southern California.
Yeah.
You know, you could see that in Phoenix,
Yeah.
where some of my in-laws live.
Yeah.
Phoenix is miles from
It's
Los
a-
Angeles.
it's
I
a
mean,
great
my
show.
God,
But this
that was...
a rocket or a big rocket launch is a pretty big event. You know, it's a big energetic thing, and you can see it from.
Well, actually, I was
miles
discussing it
away,
with
so-
my wife, and we were like, but she went, you know, you can see it in Phoenix. I was like, that's incredible, you can see it in Phoenix. That's so far away. We went, oh, hang on a minute. Well, it's a rocket. It was going high.
I had
you
pals-
can see the moon from all over the place.
And,
as well.
and also,
Because it's
and
in
also
space.
they go sideways at some point.
Yes.
You don't just go straight up. You've got to go
Yeah.
sideways to get into orbit.
I call it the greatest show on Earth because it's not on Earth and you can see it. A rocket launch is an amazing thing.
the way to think of the
I wish
Falcon-
I'd been there in the US to see it. It looked
Yeah.
like an extraordinary spectacle.
That would have been great. But the Falcon 9 is a proper big commercial rocket.
Big.
It's big enough to launch supplies to the International Space Station, which
Yeah.
it's doing fairly regularly
And is that
now.
the sole
And
supply
they've now
chain for the space?
No, there
the
are-
Soyuz
Oh,
is
Soyuz
the
is still
other.
going, is it?
Well, Progress, the unmanned Russian Progress supply
commies.
centre of supplies.
Yeah, but it goes up on a Soyuz launcher.
It does, yes. Yes, let's take your point. The rocket is the
rocket
Soyuz,
is the
as
Soyuz.
well as the capsule, as it were. And there's also the not Blue Origin, what are they called? The Antares resupply vehicle. Which,
United Launch Alliance? Is that?
it's not them, no. I think the company's called Orbital ATK. They're a private concern like SpaceX.
Blue Origin is Jeff Bezos' outfit.
Yeah.
It is, yes.
Yeah.
That's
The
correct.
most extraordinary thing I read about that was that I don't know how much it's costing a year, that program. It's expensive because rockets are expensive, aren't they? But Bezos is so wealthy he could fund it personally out of his own pocket for 90 years.
Is that how wealthy he
Yeah,
is?
he's insane. You know, he became the world's most wealthy man, and it made headlines a few months ago, maybe 6 months ago. But what didn't make headlines is the very next day he dropped back down to second again because of
the share
fluctuations. Because it's all
prices
stocks,
dropped.
isn't
Yeah,
it?
exactly.
His net
Yeah.
worth is theoretical because it's all tied up in Amazon stocks.
And he made all that money from being the dancer in the Happy Mondays.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Close enough.
And the other thing about the Falcon 9, of course, is SpaceX has pulled off this tremendous trick of building a reusable launcher. At least 10 times now
Yep.
they have recovered Falcon 9 launchers by dropping them back onto a barge
Yeah.
and firing rockets and
Or
and
landing
they can
them.
refurbish them. And they have reused They've reused a couple of them so far?
Two, I think. And the Falcon Heavy launch, I believe that the two outer boosters, if you like, outer elements, are flight proven, as SpaceX say. Pre-owned. They have run before.
And just to explain, the Falcon Heavy is, to put it simply, 3 Falcon 9s strapped together.
So it's a Falcon 27.
It actually is.
Yeah.
It's got 27 motors. It truly
Really?
is. Yeah. It truly
so-
is. Follows the Soviet design in that respect.
Okay,
Lots of
now-
little motors rather than a few big ones like the Americans
And
did.
Educate me in the
this is-
general sort of rocket scheme of things. How does the Falcon Heavy compare in size and power to the Saturn V, the biggest rocket?
Yeah, the Falcon Heavy can lift 54 metric tons. I think the Saturn V was 120 something metric tons.
But depending, well, they say lift. This is a question. We're talking
To
about
where?
lifting to low Earth orbit, or lifting to the moon, or lifting to Mars. And these are 3 very different things, because getting into low Earth orbit is hard, getting to the moon is harder and takes even more energy and more power, and then getting to Mars will take even more. And one of the main objectives of SpaceX is to build vehicles that can go to Mars.
Yep.
And Falcon Heavy can get some stuff to Mars.
Yeah, they could get a Tesla into Mars orbit.
Just to take a step back, you asked a moment ago how powerful this is compared to, say, the Saturn V. I'm not quite sure, but I think it is a little bit more powerful than the Saturn V, isn't it? The Heavy?
Don't think so. I can tell you that it is twice as powerful as the next most powerful rocket on Earth, which is the Delta IV, which has the ability to lift 26 metric tons to Mars, I suppose.
In terms of power, the one statistic that I always remember about the Saturn V is that at full power, in other words, at launch, the stage 1 of the Saturn V produced as much power as the entire UK national grid does at maximum output. So if you can imagine that you've got one machine producing as much power as the entire UK national grid is capable of producing.
Why did you see that stat the other day? There's a new iMac out, an iMac Pro.
Yeah, a stupidly expensive one.
Yeah, and they said that one of those new iMac Pros has as much power as the Apple II, the second computer that Apple ever made. Obviously not one Apple II. They meant all of the Apple IIs ever made. And there were, I think, sort of 750,000 of them or something. One single computer.
I love the way that technology's advanced, and it's great that technology's advanced for a private space concern, because SpaceX developed the Falcon system pretty quickly. I know it's always behind schedule, and just like Tesla, the dates that they announce are never the dates that they deliver, but they do eventually get there and prove these bonkers ideas do actually work.
Just to think about where this Tesla is going, I'm not actually quite clear on what kind of an orbit they've got planned for this Roadster, because basically it's a test cargo that they don't mind losing. Whenever SpaceX has launched the first of any of their rockets, they've always used as a test payload something that's sort of a little bit tongue-in-cheek. They had a wheel of cheese. And,
yeah, they sent that up in Dragon, didn't they?
That's right, yeah. And for the Falcon Heavy, it's going to be, this Tesla Roadster. There was talk of getting into a Mars orbit, but when they say a Mars orbit, I'm not sure that they actually mean an orbit around Mars.
Mm-hmm.
They mean an orbit around the Sun that is going to take it past Mars?
Quite possibly.
Because if my understanding of orbital dynamics is correct, it's one thing to fire your Tesla Roadster on the kind of trajectory that's going to take it to Mars. But then once you get to Mars, in order to get into an orbit around Mars, you've then got to slow it down again quite a bit to make that orbit. And that requires that, as well as firing your Roadster to Mars, you've got to package with it a big enough rocket to slow down that Roadster. And that's quite a lot of mass to carry. And so to keep things a little bit simpler, they're going to send it on some kind of trajectory that's going to
It's a drive
take
by.
it. It's a drive. Yeah.
And then do they want to get it back?
Oh, no.
No.
It's
Oh,
not
right,
coming
that
back.
Roadster's
No.
gone.
That Roadster's gone.
Right, okay.
It's never coming back.
Or to leave Earth, you've got to do 17,600 miles per hour to escape Earth gravity.
To make low Earth orbit, you need about 17.
If you then want to leave Earth, you've got to get to something like 25,000 miles per hour, I
sounds
believe.
right, yeah.
And you just keep going. And what you do is you set a trajectory for where you think Mars is going to be in about 3 months, or however long it will take you to get there.
Yeah.
So you don't go to where Mars is, you go to where Mars is going to be, the opposite of a closing door, But that's not the trick. That's not the wonderful thing about the Falcon Heavy for me. It's the launch rather than where it's going, because what they're going to do is, once the 3-element rocket takes off from launch pad 39A, by the way, one of the most important planetary launch site on
Because
Earth.
it's where Apollo 11 launched from to go to the moon.
But it's what they do. They recover the boosters. They're going to recover the two side elements. They'll fall out of the sky, having carried enough fuel up to be able to brake to reverse, because it takes energy to get up there. You need a certain amount of energy to bring you back to where you were. And it falls back using these incredible titanium fins. Have you seen it? They're like the feet on insects, you know, that have those sort of splayed hairs that slow them down.
What you're keeping the fuel for, gravity is going to bring those boosters back down. What you need the energy for is to stop the booster hitting the ground fast enough to destroy it.
Nicely put.
You're using the fuel to slow the booster down at the last minute.
Yeah.
And that's your kind of classic, bouncing a broomstick on your palm with wibbly trick.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's a great analogy.
explained
A
that very
broomstick
well,
on the
yeah.
hand. Yeah. So these two boosters will fall back to Earth and will land on these landing pads that they have back at John F. Kennedy Space Center. However, the central core will continue for quite some time before the upper stage separates, and that central core will then fall back to Earth and land on a drone ship out in the Atlantic. Now, drama, this is what's attracted me to this. It's the drama of the can he do all three? If we get one of those boosters back to Earth, that's what they've done before. If we get two of those boosters back to Earth almost simultaneously, that's hard and fantastic for a first attempt. If they get all three back, it'll be remarkable.
It's a speedboat.
It's like a magician kind of doing a trick. What do you think, ladies and
Yeah,
gentlemen?
yeah,
If I get one of these boosters back, you'd be impressed.
Exactly.
If I get two boosters back, you'd be really impressed.
That's how I see
Now,
it.
What if I could
question
get-
for you. Are these boosters then, as they come back down to Earth, are they being controlled manually, or is it all done with an automated
Autonomously.
I believe it's all
Is it?
computer.
Okay.
Yeah, it's-
Interesting.
I think at about 1 minute before launch, everything goes internal. And Falcon takes care of its own business, rather like
Wow.
a Tesla parking. And when you watch it, it defies belief. We've seen shots of Thunderbird 3 landing back through that round building in Thunderbirds on Tracy Island. And that's science fiction. Rockets landing on their tail is science fiction. SpaceX have proved that they can actually do it on Earth. Yes, I know there are others doing it as well, but no one else has done it from orbit yet, apart from SpaceX.
Yeah, and they're doing it with a vehicle that they are using commercially to take supplies to the International Space Station. It's a very, very impressive technical achievement.
So is this basically the technology now earns its keep with the genuine supply chain need and delivering satellites and for whoever wants them into orbit?
Yep.
But then this funds Elon Musk's Mars ambitions, which are much more of a sort of pet project for him.
I'm no accountant, and I'm not going to pretend to... But certainly SpaceX is running at least a semi-commercial operation, and they are being paid by NASA to send resupply missions up to the ISS. They're doing those missions successfully. I think they had a bit of an injection of money from NASA early
to help
on
them
to
develop
the program. But yeah, they're running a commercial program.
It's not just a big sort of vanity project. There is actually it's
No,
a
no,
business
it's not.
of sorts.
Oh, yeah.
Although, of course, there is this interesting thing. One of the key things is the reusability, because the whole operation gets a lot cheaper if you can reuse your very expensive space hardware.
Well, this was going to be my question. There's all this complexity of bringing these things back down to land neatly on their tails. It's worth its while.
Yeah.
Than just letting them drop into the sea and...
Imagine if
It's
every
very
time
different.
you got a flight across the Atlantic,
threw
they
the plane
threw the
away.
plane away.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's how expensive rocketry used to be until you started finding ways of bringing stuff back and reusing it. And they're even reusing the Dragon capsule now as well, the resupply
Well, in fact,
vessel.
Not many people know this, I think. They used to reuse the shuttle solid fuel boosters, as well as using as well as reusing the shuttle itself, although it wasn't so much reused as more
The
as
orbiter.
rebuilt. Sorry, the orbiter, yes,
Yeah.
quite right. It wasn't anything like as reusable a craft as it was supposed to be. And they had to completely rebuild all of the orbiter's engines before each flight, which is why it was so much more expensive to run the program than intended. But those solid fuel boosters that separated a couple of minutes into the flight, they were recovered from the sea each time. And again, they refurbished those and reused those.
The main tank they didn't, did they?
Correct.
But
It burns up,
Yeah.
they had a spare one when the programme was cancelled. Because that shuttle that's in California, in Los Angeles, in the science centre there, I can't remember which one it is, Endeavour?
It's not Pathfinder, is it? Which is a one-to-one. What do they call a test
this
article?
one. I think this one has really flown.
Right.
And it's
Maybe it is Endeavour.
now, it sits on what would have been its wheels
Yeah.
in this big hall. It's a fantastic thing up close. So I've never seen a shuttle up close. Well, why would you have done? But because it's bigger than you expect, but it's also flakier than you expect. It looks more like you'd think the Millennium Falcon out of Star Wars, where it's all sort of tatty and battered and scrappy around the edges. Yeah. But it's wonderful. It sits on its undercarriage legs, but then they sit into these special, almost like bowls, that then allow the legs to move around if there's an earthquake. Because if they rigidly bolted it to the floor and there was an earthquake, it would shake it to pieces. So it's allowed to move in the event of an earthquake. But what they want to do, and what they're doing quite soon, I think, they're going to build a huge, tall structure, and they're going to the shuttle on its end, because they got some of the boosters. But then NASA went, we've got a spare tank at their facility where they built them, and they shipped it. They took it out round through the Panama Canal,
on a barge
up into the port of Los Angeles. And then the same way, if you look on YouTube, you'll see the time-lapse footage of them driving the shuttle through the streets to get it to the science centre. Then they did the same later with the tank, took it through the streets, and now they're just trying to raise enough money to effectively reassemble the whole thing into a launch configuration.
I'll do it.
And put a building around it. It's going to be amazing.
That will be fantastic. On a totally different track, I thought there's an interesting thing struck me about this whole Tesla going into space as the test cargo for the Falcon Heavy, which is that actually it's a very striking sort of mirror of one little aspect of the Apollo program and the Saturn V, which is that at the height of the public interest in the Apollo program, and when the Apollo astronauts were being, I think actually had some kind of contract with Time magazine to do regular updates.
Yeah. They all got Mustangs, and they all
they all got Corvettes.
Corvettes, sorry.
Right.
Oops, yes.
This is it. All of the Apollo astronauts had Corvettes, and the Corvette is kind of iconic of a particular era of the evolution of the automobile. A proudly petrol-snorting beast, a great sports car icon of its time.
But you know,
and now
the
in
Apollo
this era,
astronauts all had Corvettes, and it was quite a tradition for a long time. And then my colleague Jeremy Clarkson once interviewed, I think it was the guy who was the first one to manually land a shuttle. And
John
different
Young?
era.
Crippen or Young?
I don't know. I can't remember his name. I think it was that guy. Much different era. And Jeremy said to him, and so what do you drive? Thinking maybe he's still got a Corvette. And he went, I have a Camry. So disappointing. Sorry, I interrupted.
Lovely.
But then,
sorry. I have to interrupt the interruption. I'm sorry, Zog. John Young, who would have been the guy, died last week.
Oh, was that the same guy?
Yeah, one of the moonwalkers.
But
sorry, Zog.
And so in this new era of space, and SpaceX is absolutely a company that is at the heart of this new era of private space innovation. And Musk might well be the guy, and SpaceX may well be the company that builds the hardware and runs the mission that puts the first people on Mars. Who knows? A car that is iconic of the new era of motoring is going up on that rocket. You've got a Tesla Roadster atop their Falcon Heavy. It's just an interesting kind of mirror of, a generational change, in both industries.
Look at the lawman beating up the wrong guy. Oh man, look at those cavemen go. I suppose what I'm trying to ask is there life on Mars?
I've got to say, if you think Falcon Heavy is potentially exciting, don't miss it. It'll be all over the internet. It's going to happen at the end of January. Right? We don't know exactly when. In fact, as we speak right now, perhaps in the next 24 hours, in between the time it takes to record this programme and put it out, they're probably going to static fire the 27 engines on the launch pad at Kennedy just to make sure it's all working before the final launch. And it's going to be the most exciting thing you'll ever see. I know there's no one on board it, right? But it's going to be one of the most exciting things you'll ever see, because the potential for this to go wrong is greater than anything before, which makes it more jeopardous and therefore more entertaining. And beyond that, we're going to have to come back to this programme in about, 10 years or perhaps 30 years, depending on Elon Musk's scheduling, for the next generation beyond Falcon Heavy, which is called BFR. And do you know what that stands for?
I can guess.
Well, we all know what it stands for.
Big rocket, isn't it?
No, it's Big Falcon Rocket.
Of course it is.
Of course it is, yes.
So the Falcon Heavy launch was a success?
Yes, sir, Mr. Musk.
And my Tesla Roadster was on board?
Certainly was, Mr. Musk.
Right. Okay. Well done, gentlemen.
You should go home and get some sleep, Mr. Musk, sir.
Yeah, I can't do that.
Why not, sir?
Because you fired my goddamn car into space.
But you told us to do that, sir.
I'd have to be goddamn crazy to tell you to do a thing like that. Do I look crazy to you?
No, Mr. Musk, sir.
That's right. The answer is no.
Space weasels.
Sniff Petrol! With Gareth Jones on speed!
You know, cars really are out of the world, fellas, aren't they? Especially when you've got a Tesla potentially on its way to Mars. But really, you've got to ask, what about the cars on Earth? Where's the next breakthroughs?
I want to discuss the internal combustion engine in a moment because it's not done yet. But it seems that the buzzword for EVs at the moment is not in the motors or the magnets in the motors, but in the batteries. That solid-state batteries is what everyone is aspiring to. Now, do you understand the principle in which solid-state batteries work? Is it basically a flash drive? What is it?
I don't know a little about this, but as I understand it, the key thing about a solid-state battery is that you're replacing a liquid electrolyte with a solid electrolyte. So in a regular battery, you've got a couple of electrodes, which you hook up to whatever you want to power. You've got your couple of electrodes, and then in between those electrodes, you've got your electrolyte, a chemical solution, and chemistry happens in between your electrodes, and that produces your current. Now, batteries can have all kinds of different chemistry. We're all familiar with old-style lead-acid batteries, which have lead and acid in them.
Is that why they're called lead-acid batteries? Nickel
Your phone's probably got a lithium-ion battery in it, and lithium-ion batteries are in most
polymer
EVs now.
as well?
Yeah, I'm not sure. The
hydride?
lithium here is referring to chemistry that's happening in between the electrodes. But those lithium-ion batteries have still generally got a liquid electrolyte in them. There's a liquid in the battery that, amongst other things, enables a current to flow within the battery. Because if you remember your basic electronics, if you've got current flowing from one electrode to the other on the outside of your battery, you've also got to have a current flowing from one electrode to the other on the inside of the battery. You've got to have a complete circuit. And the chemistry inside the battery is what's kind of forcing that current around the whole circuit.
So what's a solid-state battery?
The solid-state battery, as I understand it, they do away with the liquid electrolyte and they come up with a clever bit of solid battery engineering, where instead of having a liquid electrolyte in between your electrodes, you only have a solid in between your two electrodes. And as I understand it, that means that you can make the gap between your electrodes in the battery much smaller, which means you can get a higher energy density out of your battery. And there are potentially advantages in having a longer lived battery, because basically this solid thing, which is, it's a bit more like a chip in that there are no moving parts, there's no fluid sloshing around in it. This thing, it doesn't suffer from problems. If a battery overheats, you're not sort of going to get liquid boiling inside your overheated battery, for example.
But there's no liquid in a mobile phone battery. That's a dry cell. And the rechargeable batteries that radio-controlled aircraft use, there's no liquid there, surely.
I don't know. I think there is liquid inside those batteries. As far as I know, there is liquid inside those. It might be in the form of a paste rather than a big sloshy pail of liquid, as in your traditional car battery.
Bucket of electricity.
Bucket of electricity. But I think there is a paste of those things. But I think these things, they're more expensive to build. It's harder to come up with, I believe, the right kind of composition for your solid electrolyte, to come up with something that's going to do the same job as a liquid electrolyte. If you think about it, if you've got to have something that's going to conduct electricity, and whatever happens chemically inside this thing has got to sort of distribute itself evenly amongst the material, that's presumably going to be harder with a solid than a liquid. A liquid is going to do a very good job of sharing out all of the dissolved stuff in that liquid is going to distribute itself amongst the volume of the liquid in a way that you wouldn't get an even distribution maybe in a solid. It's harder to get a good contact between your electrodes and your solid electrolytes, and I think they can be a bit more mechanically fragile. So I think the bottom line is that while you can get some definite advantages from going solid state with your battery, it's an incremental change rather than a massive change.
And in some ways, it's a change back to an old terminology. Do you remember when solid state was a phrase that we used perhaps in the 60s and the 70s for transistors, as opposed to valves at that point? Oh no, it's going to be solid state. It's almost like saying gasoline. It's a slightly arcane form that's now used in a different way. And I like that. Solid state, sort of slightly 70s, very grundy.
If that becomes the standard battery technology, they'll just be batteries. They won't be solid state batteries anymore.
Do you get excited by battery technology, like you get excited by petrol engine technology, Richard?
Funnily enough, I do, because I think there's a palpable sort of heat to it, not literally, or sometimes literally, but it feels like this is an area in which we're making incredible advancements incredibly quickly. I know it's all quite incremental, but the rate of progress has suddenly accelerated in terms of energy density, which is obviously the big thing, isn't it? And then looking at the next evolution of the technology. So from what I've read, the feeling is that lithium-ion batteries for use in cars on that sort of scale and for the required energy density are kind of getting to the end of how much they can
laws of physics
eked out. And so we move on to these solid state things, which is you're saying, more compact and better energy density. But it's quite exciting. We've gone in a relatively short amount of time, really short amount of time, really, in the general sort of life of the car, from electric cars that would struggle to have a 100-mile range to now Teslas and stuff that's coming out this year that I was just looking up today. You know, got this Audi, what's it called? E-tron, and the Jaguar I-Pace, of course, which is coming very soon.
Sorry, can I say e-tron correctly?
E-tron.
Which is almost identical to the French word for turd.
Is it really?
Yeah, and Audi have gone, no, it's fine. And their French importer, presumably, is going, please, seriously, please reconsider. Please. No, there's nothing wrong with e-tron. So, in France, they're going, so I hear, Marcel, you've got a new electric car. What is it? It is an Audi turd. No, I'm going to trade it in for a Jaguar I-Pace. Although I-Pace obviously is the French for vagina, so
what does Model 3 mean then in Chinese? It probably means...
Oh, don't ask.
Yeah.
One thing to remember about the solid state thing, I think one of the things they do quite well is I believe you can charge a solid state battery faster than...
in 9 seconds or something.
It's another frontier, isn't it?
Apart from what's your ultimate range, how quickly can you maybe give it a 50% charge?
Yeah, well, there's these new sort of the next generation chargers, sort of 150 kilowatt, I think, and then I don't know where they'll go beyond that. I suppose the chicken and egg battery technology, charger infrastructure, how much they try and future-proof that without going so powerful that it doesn't work with the existing generation of cars. These are the sort of things we'll wrestle with, and we are humans, we're adaptable and we evolve, and this is what makes us who we are. And once upon a time, you had to buy petrol from a chemist shop. If the chemist was closed, your car didn't go, and that's fine. We sort of figured it out, didn't we, in the end?
We got there in the end,
It's the same with electricity. I'm sure we'll make it work.
Yeah, I mean, we have to keep making steps. The biggest steps probably in battery technology are going to come from different chemistry. Solid-state batteries are a step forward, but it doesn't give you the kind of massive step forward that maybe some better chemistry might give you.
There's an aluminium battery on the way, perhaps, is that right?
There are all kinds of alternative chemistries that you could use. I mean, I think the holy grail is a zinc air battery, I believe.
That's it. Oh, yes.
If you could manage to come up with a zinc air battery that could use, I think this is right, that can use all of the possible oxidation states of zinc rather than just turning zinc into zinc hydroxide, which is a little bit easier to work chemically.
I hate it when that happens.
If you do this, you
all
could,
the time.
then you could actually get an energy density out of a battery that would be on a par with that of liquid fuel.
Right.
On a par, because petrol is something like 50 megajoules per kilogram.
So basically we're looking at the war between solids and liquids here,
about
aren't we?
2 megajoules, I think,
Right.
per kilogram.
So, who's best, liquid or solid? You decide. Listen, I want to talk about some of the electric cars that are coming out at the moment. We mentioned SpaceX and Elon Musk and Tesla, so we've got to talk about what's happening there very briefly. The Model 3 is reaching people now. Do you know anyone who's driven one, Richard? Have you met
Not personally, but I've read some of the US journalists who've had a go in it, which have all been not through Tesla themselves, but through getting friendly owners to let them have a go in it, because I think those first production Model 3s were going to employees of Tesla. And now actual punters have got their hands on them. I read some really glowing reports. There's a guy called Alex Roy, who's quite a well-known US car writer and presenter, and also seems to own a high-end audio shop in New York, I don't know. And he was absolutely effusive in his praise. And it's funny, you read about the Model 3, and I think the elephant in the room is the fact that they're still not making as many cars as Elon Musk claimed. And
Up to 1,500 now, is that right?
Something like that, yeah, but he was saying they're going to do 20,000 a month, and he's not even close. And I mean, that is a schoolboy error. It's like an established car company would have a production ramp-up plan, and they'd be sticking to it, and they have agreement with suppliers, and they would have all their processes in place. If it was Ford, it's not their first rodeo. They would know how to do this. And yeah, sure, there'd be issues along the way, and they would not quite hit targets entirely, and they have lots of internal targets and gateways and all this sort of stuff. But they wouldn't have a target of 20,000 a month, and they'd be falling short of that to the tune of 18,500. I mean, that is shocking. If you're aiming for 20,000 a month, you've told your dashboard supplier that you want 20,000 dashboards a month. So are they all stacking them up? Or I presume there's some kind of just-in-time system. So then the burden is on the supplier to sort of slow down their production, which screws their figures, the people they buy their component parts from. There's a whole knock-on to a chain, which I think usually suppliers and manufacturers have both ways it works, where they have penalties in place if one side lets the other down. And I don't know how that's affecting Tesla if they have those agreements in place. But the point is, they've screwed up royally, really, or Elon Musk is talking a bigger game than he knew they could ever achieve. I'm not sure.
He's a very ambitious man. I think that comes out in his forecast. They are optimistic, absolutely. Yeah. But I like a bit of optimism. If Elon Musk's SpaceX project can be compared to Tesla in any way, they have actually delivered on everything ultimately. They've got there a lot later. Yeah. And maybe if they can hang on, that Tesla will get there eventually, but it's going to be painful.
This is my beef.
They're going from scratch.
This is absolutely my beef with Elon Musk when it comes to the car-making side of things. He can deliver his rocket program late. Rockets are bespoke, essentially one-off things, aren't they?
And you've got a couple of customers. Basically, you're launching stuff for NASA or for the US military.
Yes. Yeah. It's
or
not like
people.
There's 500,000 people who've given you a bit of money and would like their rocket launched now, please. Yeah. That's not how space works. But cars, it does. And this car is a mainstream car now, and the numbers they're intending to sell it in, the fanboys won't protect them. They're going to cut through into the real world where people won't tolerate shoddy quality, and they also won't tolerate a car being massively late. They'll get bored. They'll want their money back, and they'll go and buy an Audi or a Jag or a BMW or one of the new electric cars that are coming very soon.
Well, this is the thing. There's now a much greater danger of Tesla being overtaken by the more established businesses who are, within the framework of their much greater expertise in mass manufacturing vehicles,
that's it.
Are making the electric
manufacturing
vehicles.
Bit. And the thing is, but then I've been reading these tests of the Model 3, and I've been looking at the pictures again and sort of seeing it out in the real world and watching some video on YouTube of owners who, a lot of them are sort of hyper fanboys, and they do endless YouTube videos of today. I'm going to show you how I open the glove compartment. And I'll be honest, I get fascinated by it, and I'm looking at the Model 3 and I'm thinking it's a very desirable object. I look at it and I kind of want one. I love that minimalist interior. The exterior is, it's all right. I love that touchscreen, the graphics. I mean, I think some of the UI decisions they've made are bonkers. And did you know the auto wipers, the Model 3s were delivered without automatic wipers, but it's now been given to all existing cars with an over-the-air update, because Tesla automatic wipers on the Model 3 and on the most recent Model S and X models, it doesn't use the usual sensor that all other cars have.
Let me guess, it uses something basically internet-based GPS. It looks at the weather radar in your area, figures out where it's raining, and works out if that's where you are.
No, Elon Musk is in space in a satellite, and he's watching with binoculars when it's raining, and he presses a button and makes a car. No, do you know what it is? It's the cameras. Auto wipers, they've got to detect when the screen is wet and give a swoosh of the wipers. They're infuriating in all cars. They never work properly. But Tesla's system is different. It uses the cameras, because all of those cars are covered in cameras for the autopilot system. And I guess the ones behind the screen.
If it sees spots of water...
Well, just reading up on the internet, because I was fascinated. It's like, wow, they can give your car a new feature just right over the air update. How brilliant. Love that. But then reading people going, I've tried out my new auto wipers. Yeah, they don't really work properly. You just go,
it's a classic auto wiper.
So basically,
they sound like even worse than auto wipers on other cars. That's the thing. Sorry, Gareth, I was going to wind up my thought, which is that I think the Model 3 is an incredibly desirable car, and I think we probably said this on the show before, but it's all for naught if they cannot reliably mass produce it in the way that they claim. And at the moment, there's little evidence that it's going to plan, and I think that's where they've dropped the ball a bit. And it's a shame. I wish them the best luck, because as the old cliche goes, Tesla, if they didn't exist, we'd have to invent them. Because they've given everyone else a kick up the arse, and it will make the other electric cars coming from other people, I think, up their game.
They're doing great work.
For that alone, we need them, but we also need them to prove that they're not BS merchants.
Yeah. I can't separate Tesla from SpaceX. For me, it's one entity. It's driven by this imagineering lunatic.
I can't see that, but they are such different businesses. As Richard says, they are such massively different businesses. You know,
Volume.
The difference between...
Bespoke, And yet, SpaceX are now turning out rockets and turning round rockets and launching rockets within 24 hours of that Falcon 9 launch that put Zoomer up. They had Falcon Heavy on the same launch pad. They built the processing facility in a matter of months. They've got dual launch capacities. They've built one at Vandenberg Air Force Base now. There's an awful lot of work's going in for a long-term goal. And that's how I'm willing to hope that we can hang on so he gets to the long-term goal. Yeah, there's going to be horrible disappointments.
So that's the thing, you see, his long-term goal in space rocket launches is that he is still ahead of everyone else. Well, that's not the case in the car world. He's not ahead of everyone else, and he doesn't have any particular technology that anyone, I think, would want to buy. They're all working on their own stuff.
He's ahead of Jaguar, he's ahead of Audi, ahead of Porsche.
Yeah, but as soon as they arrive, they potentially are going to destroy him, because they're going to arrive with, I think, cars that you can actually go in and buy. If you ordered a Model 3 now, when are you going to get it? 2020, 2021? I mean, at the current rate of progress.
I'm going to get one in 2019, but I'm paying an extra 20 grand.
Well, that's the thing, because I was looking at this, I was going, I really quite fancy one of those, and I think they're coming to the UK, I don't know if it's this year, it might be next year now. And I was thinking, well, there's literally no chance of getting one unless you want to pay a huge premium. But then I'm thinking, well, the Jag I-Pace will be out by then, and I really, really want one of those, so I'll just get one of those if I was in the market and I have the money. That's the problem, you see. I think it's a very desirable object, that car, but it's not so desirable that you would exclude all others, because I think that some of the other stuff that's going to come along is also going to be very desirable, and that you'll actually be able to get it, and you'll be able to get it serviced and not have these concerns about the company going a bit screwy and squiffy, because all these proclamations that Musk makes are basically just to shore up his stock as much as anything. He needs
he's
that.
a PR man.
So what's the future? Are they going to end up being forced to collaborate with an existing car manufacturer?
I don't think who?
Toyota used to own part of Tesla, but they've sold all their shares now. There is beginnings of a relationship.
Well, Mercedes gave them a load of money in the early days as well, but I don't think that Merck now need or want that, because their electric cars are coming very soon, and I don't think there's any sort of overlap.
Over the Christmas period, I went out into London, and on New Year's Day, I saw a McLaren P1 going down Oxford Street. Man, I actually shrieked like a child, and it actually made a lovely noise. I'd never heard one in the flesh. It makes a real rip-snorty noise, real sing-song, you know. And that was possibly the second most exciting thing that happened to me in terms of cars, because I went down the King's Road a few days earlier and saw 3 Model X's, Tesla Model X's, 3 on the King's Road. So it's very fashionable. That's what that tells me. That's very exciting. And I was excited by seeing 3 of them. You know, wow, 3 big numbers.
3 in the wild, yeah.
But
because I'm seeing them around quite a lot now, the Model X's. There's a lot sort of around, and it is always in, because, well, I was going to say it's always in the well-to-do parts of London. It has to be. They're incredibly expensive. But in sort of Hampstead and places, there's quite a few of them around.
They're around. But we've got 2 minutes, right? 2 minutes. Is the petrol or the internal combustion engine dead? What are the options for that now? How much more efficient can we get in 2 minutes? Zog, are we absolutely at the end now?
We do seem to be eking out with some of the developments with the compression ignition stuff that Mazda and Mercedes and some other people have been looking into, started to use. We are getting more efficiency out of the petrol engine, but we must be getting pretty close to the limit, I would have thought.
Yeah.
We're also just getting to the point where even you could get more efficiency out of the petrol engine,
you'd be legislated against.
You'd be wasting your time doing it, because the electric option is going to become so much more desirable in so many ways. The simplicity and efficiency of an electric motor compared to a petrol motor, an internal combustion engine, is insane, and we're getting better at the battery stuff.
I completely agree with you, but I don't think the petrol engine is completely dead. The changeover period is going to be longer than perhaps we think. There's going to be loads of new electric cars in the next couple of years, and we're going to be drowning in them. You're going to be spoilt for choice. But the take-up rate is going to be slower, I think, than even some of the car makers are expecting. I was reading this week that I think that some of the numbers that they're planning on building in the future, and you just think, that's a lot of cars you're suddenly saying are going to be pure electric. It will happen, but the acceptance rate... My Nissan Leaf has gone now, to my great sadness, but when I was driving that, another time people go, oh, I couldn't have an electric car because, I mean, how do you charge it up? You don't have a charger at home. I just go, it's really easy. I just charge it around the corner in a public point or at my office. It's not an issue. Why? Oh, right, yeah, okay, yeah. But people's immediate reaction is, oh, I couldn't have one of those. And getting over that inertia is going to take time. And in the meantime, the petrol engine will soldier on. Particularly this country, diesel now is sort of being legislated against more, and there's this tide turning against it. So it's petrol that will sort of see us through to the moment when electric power becomes the norm.
And if that remains the truth, long may Gareth Jones on Speed describe itself as the podcast for petrol heads. We'll have something to talk about. Hooray. You've been listening to Richard talking.
Goodbye.
To Zog talking.
Goodbye.
And me interrupting. I was Gareth. See ya.
To send us an email, see pictures, get song lyrics, join our Facebook fan site, follow us on Twitter, or to find out about sponsorship opportunities, go to garethjones.tv. Gareth Jones on Speed is made in London by Whizbang.
Gareth Jones on Speed! Speed! Speed!